Thank you for listening to the content related to logic models. Now that you have learned how to expand your scope of work into the creation of a logic model, it's time to understand the phases that go into managing a project. After completing this course, you can expect to be able to define what a phase during a project represents, describe the four phases that occur during a project, and learn what a sequential phase model is and how you can utilize one during a project. It's important to remember that phases for a project are essential to incorporate because all projects have a defined beginning and end. The phases merely help us understand and sort all of the information that goes in between those parts. What is the definition of a phase during a project? When referring to project management, a phase is defined as being a grouping of similar activities that has a very loosely defined beginning and end. Phases occur in a sequential order. However, that does not mean that when one phase begins, the one preceding it automatically ends. Activities that occur during a specific phase can carry across multiple phases, and there is rarely a defined end until the project itself is completed. What are the phases of a project? What are the specific phases of a project? Typically, a project is broken down into four separate phases, including initiation, planning, execution, and closeout. There are also project management texts that include monitoring and control as its own phase. However, during this course, we will include it as part of the execution phase. The project management lifecycle. The following video is meant to expand on your understanding of project phases. When you are listening to the video, attempt to picture the phases and their parts in order to create a visual representation.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Witt, Director of ProjectManager.com. Well, welcome today to our whiteboard session on the project management lifecycle. So we get many questions from the forum on this, and a lot of people tend to get different life cycles confused on a project, which makes sense. There's several things going on at one time. So we want to clarify today the difference between the delivery process and the project management process and who's doing what. So if we first take the delivery process is what your team members are primarily engaged in. And the team members are doing the definition, they're doing the design, they're doing the development, deployment, and departure of the main parts of the project. So that's the delivery. Then you are doing the rest of the stuff. So there's a lot going on for the project manager. So this is the project management life cycle as documented from a source of the project management body of knowledge produced by PMI, the Project Management Institute. So if you look on this cross section, this is the delivery phase, the project management phase, and the trends are the level of activity going on. So for the delivery of the project, you can see it starts and then it begins to build and then it tapers off towards the finish. But for the project management, there are different things going on. So as the delivery process starts, the initiating of the project, because within initiating, remember we have the project charter, which is the main deliverable from initiating. So you get the approval and the sign off for the project. So it makes sense that that's here in the start. So the initiating begins. And then at the same time, the planning can also begin as well. So with the planning, remember the main deliverable is the project plan. So you're coming up with the processes of the schedule, the milestones, all of the main deliverables to be produced in that project. And so the planning begins throughout the project through the departure, and then also the executing, monitoring, and controlling of the project begins. So you can see as the delivery starts, the executing, monitoring, and controlling. So what's going on there? So there you as the project manager, you're producing the performance reports for the project. You're gauging where are we now and where should we be, and what are the things that we have to do to control the project to get it back on track. You're also managing issue logs, risk logs, change logs, and also monitoring the deliverables being produced from the project. And then ultimately is the closing. So the closing is at the end as the departure, so the team members begin departing from the project. So you're closing things out. So the main deliverables there are the user acceptance, the approval of the project, any kind of final reports that go out to different team members, the stakeholders, the change control board, and the project documents, and also the lessons learned. So just wanted to clarify, because again, these are some of the questions that come from the forum, really clarifying the difference between the project management life cycle and the delivery life cycle. They go hand in hand, but remembering these are the things that the project manager is responsible for, and this is what you're gauging for your team members. So I hope that helps. Again, it's one of the main questions coming from the forum, and we at projectmanager.com have tried to integrate this into our software. So if you need some tips, tools, and techniques, and better yet, software to help you manage your project management lifecycle, then sign up today for our software at projectmanager.com.
Now that you have watched the video and gotten an introduction on the project phases, let's break them down a bit more. The first phase is the initiation. This is where the project is conceptualized and the information gathering is completed. A nonprofit organization may use this phase to complete a grant application. All of the information and research that goes into a grant is used to execute a project timeline, project budget, and formulate a project team. Recruiting the project team is incredibly important. A project team is recruited early because personnel can make or break a project. During the initiation stage, it is determined how many project personnel will realistically be needed to complete a project. Nonprofit projects usually include less personnel than a similar private sector project, so it is extra important to select the right individuals. Another very important activity that occurs during the initiation phase is researching and acquiring the technology that will be needed to manage the project management process. Technology choices generally need to be budgeted or included in grant applications. It's important that multiple different options are examined and a choice is made that best fits the organization. The next phase of a project is planning. Planning involves a lot of moving pieces. This is where the work for the process you will use to complete the project is decided. Schedule and budgets are all formulated, and a workflow diagram is completed. Workflow diagrams help to visualize which activities need to be completed before other activities can begin. They are also used to divide tasks for the project team. The diagrams will be adjusted as you go with the project, but a well thought out workflow can be beneficial, especially in the beginning of the project when everyone is still trying to completely define their roles. Additionally, several other project plans are completed during this phase. A procurement plan is one of the most consequential decisions that happens during a project, because it's what decides where and how all the purchasing will take place. Purchases are divided between commodities, vendors, and partnerships. Commodities are the items you purchase, which are important, but you are able to select the lowest cost available. Examples include things like paper, office supplies, and furniture. Vendors are the entities who supply things that are more specialized. A bid or request for proposal might go out for selecting who will supply these items. Examples include things like technology services, website design, phone companies, and potentially food, depending on what your project involves. The last form of procurement is partnerships, which for a nonprofit might be written into a grant application as a key stakeholder who you specify you are going to do business with. In the private sector, this can involve activities like revenue sharing. Another area of the planning process is developing a control plan, which specifically describes projections on costs, schedules, and other related items that are essential for completing a project on time and on cost. A project controls plan will also examine the systems that you will be using during the length of the project. Execution is the third phase of a project. This is where the work of the project actually begins. It's after you receive the grant and the contract has been signed, and you can start working on project goals. Part of this execution means managing the budget and constantly monitoring the quality of the work that is being done and the expectations of the stakeholders. It also means communicating with the project team and managing the overall workflow. If you are the project manager during this phase, it is likely that you will be guiding program staff through the project activities. A nonprofit board member could be involved by making connections to other stakeholders or offering suggestions on the overall process. The final phase of a project is the closeout phase. Because this is a project, it means that it has a defined end. So, the work that is done during the closeout phase is important for finalizing all of the last details. It means that during this phase, the project itself and the team performance will be evaluated. For a nonprofit, this might mean contracting out with an independent evaluator or a university professor to help determine the effectiveness of the project activities. These are both details that should be decided early on during the initiation stage, so technology can be deployed for data collection and a process can be developed for how the data collection will occur. Other important items that might be overlooked during the closeout stage include tasks such as staff being transferred to another department, to another project, or to another organization. Also, ensuring that project documents are archived is essential. Archives are important, so administrative staff will have detailed financial records for auditors and for future projects. Archives are also needed because records can be used for future grant applications, and they can be particularly valuable for future staff and board members to have an idea of what the organization has already completed. If the project required a specific office, this is also when that would be shut down. What is a sequential relationship in project management? Understanding sequential relationships is important during project management because it helps you visualize the activities that need to be done and in what order they need to occur. A sequential phase model places the tasks of a project in order of the ones that need to be completed before the next one can begin. A popular model for visualizing this is referred to as a waterfall model. The model is designed to appear with one activity spilling into the next one to show how some tasks overlap. There are many other models that could be incorporated other than a waterfall model. Depending on the project, it might be helpful to visualize phases with more defined columns. The most important thing to remember when selecting a model is to ensure the project team is comfortable and understands it. Here is an example of a waterfall sequential phase model. You can see that all of the activities that need to be completed can be written under each phase. However, the model also allows overlapping activities to go under multiple phases. A good example would be the development of a budget. An initial budget may be theorized in the initiation phase, but will be completed during the planning phase. But even during the execution phase, the budget will be updated modified, and evaluated, indicating that budgeting goes across many different phases. During this course, you were introduced to the concept of project phases. You learned that a phase does not always have a defined beginning or end. You also were presented with the project phases, including initiation, planning, execution, and closeout. You learned that they move in a sequential order. Finally, you were presented with how a sequential phase model can be useful for visualizing the order and activities of a project. What's next? Congrats! You have completed the project phases part of this course. Next, you will be able to take a quiz to test your knowledge about the project phases. In the next lesson, you will learn about the complex world of project politics and communicating during a project. Before you move on to this module, minimize this video and click on the button at the right corner of the webpage labeled Quiz to proceed.